Ashlee, can you tell us where Melodee is? Ashlee, is Melodee okay? Do you have any comment?
Where's Melodee?
Is she in Utah? Ashlee, do you have any comment? Can you tell us where Melodee is?
Today, we delve into the mystery of 9-year-old Melodee Buzzard, who's been missing for more than a month. Her mother, Ashlee Buzzard, is now under arrest, but in a surprising twist, Ashlee's arrest is not for her daughter's disappearance. Rather, it's in connection with a different case involving a man who says Melodee is alive and that Ashlee told him where she is. I'm criminal trial attorney Sara Azari, and this is Serving Justice, where we focus on what matters most in a criminal case, the defense. And in this case, the question is, what exactly is the crime? It's about Melodee's disappearance, but what is her mother arrested for? It's very multi-layered for sure. Now, let's take you back to early October when Melodee went on a road trip with her mother, Ashlee. This surveillance video shows the two at a car rental office on October 7th. And during the trip, police say Ashlee switched license plates on the rental car and wore wigs, possibly to avoid detection. As for Melodee, police say she was last seen on October 9th on a surveillance camera near the Colorado Utah border. And when her mother, Ashlee, returned to their home in Lompoc, California, Melodee was not with her. Police have been investigating the little girl's disappearance for weeks. They say Ashlee has not been cooperative with law enforcement. The mother was even seen tearing down missing posters of her own daughter. Very strange, I have to say. As October turned into November, with still no progress finding little Melodee, things started to get even stranger until November 7th when Ashlee was arrested. The charge? Violating the personal liberty of a man named Tyler Brewer. What? Who is Tyler Brewer? And what does he have to do with any of this, if anything? Tyler Brewer tells NewsNation that he's an acquaintance of Ashlee's. He says he had been going to their Lompoc home to check on her and help her in the search for Melodee. But during a visit on November 6th, Brewer claims that Ashlee became visibly distressed. He says it started after she shared information that she apparently regretted disclosing to him. Brewer says Ashlee then prevented him from leaving her home by blocking the front door and engaging several locks. Sensationally, he's falsely imprisoned. He says he felt threatened because of a box cutter that was nearby, but he eventually made it out and reported what happened to law enforcement. Ashlee was arrested the very next day and now faces a felony charge of false imprisonment. Again, this arrest has nothing to do with little Melodee's disappearance, or does it? What could have Ashlee revealed to Tyler when they were together that day? Brewer claims she told him where the 9-year-old was and with whom. While he says he suspects the little girl is somewhere in Utah and believes she's alive, he's providing no further details. He's also concerned that because of Ashlee's mental history and recent behavior, he is not sure what she told him is even true. So, what is the real crime here as it pertains to Melodee? Is Melodee alive somewhere in Utah? Or has something happened to her? And without Melodee, how do we know if she was a victim of a crime? And what about that false imprisonment charge? What does that have to do with anything? In California, false imprisonment is a wobbler, which means it can and often is reduced to a misdemeanor. So, really, it's a nothing burger. To help break it all down, I'm joined today by NewsNation law and justice contributor and former FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer, and NewsNation legal contributor and law and crime network host Jesse Weber, and NewsNation reporter Safia Samee Ali. Thank you all for joining me today. I want to start with Jesse. I know you're very familiar with this case. Um, uh, so, um, what is the crime here? I mean, I've been saying this in the intro because we're talking about Melodee. That's our concern. But she's arrested for false imprisonment involving a guy named Tyler Brewer. What is the relationship here? What's going on?
I have a bunch of thoughts. Other than the crime, perhaps a truancy quite type of crime, because we remember that Melodee was being supposed to be homeschooled by Ashlee, but apparently Ashlee didn't file the appropriate paperwork to be homeschooled. And by the way, that's how this whole case broke out. It was a Lompoc school administrator who realized they hadn't seen Melodee in quite some time since she registered. Then my first thought is, and I am hoping and praying that Melodee is okay and that she is alive. My first thought was, if it is true that she handed off her daughter to somebody else, are you talking about a child abandonment or a child neglect charge? Possible.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about something worse, and I hope that's not what we're referring to. And obviously, there are serious questions about credibility. Then you get into a whole reign of what happened to this young girl. If you're talking about a multi-state trip, do federal charges apply? And I don't want to go down that road, but what we are dealing with is, like you said, a false imprisonment charge that could carry potentially 3 years in prison, that I think is aggravated by the allegations that she used a box cutter to essentially trap this guy. And aside from that charge and whether or not it'll be reduced to a misdemeanor, if that's true, that goes to her mental state, a mental state of a woman that clearly has information about what happened to her daughter. She traveled with her. They were on surveillance together. She allegedly changed her license plate, comes back in that Chevy without her daughter. So this is the kind of person that we're dealing with, who is apparently not cooperating with authorities. And while it's not in and of itself a crime to not provide information to law enforcement, you can't obstruct. But I think there's a larger question of, this is incredibly concerning where this 9-year-old girl is, and she was in the care and custody of this woman.
Does she have a father that's around? I'm just wondering.
Yeah, I mean, I think
He died.
he died in 2016, and I think when you listen to family members, right, they say that's when maybe the downward spiral happened. That's when she basically allegedly cut off contact with the rest of the family, who desperately want answers here and are desperately trying to just make sure that Melodee is safe and sound. But in 2016, I think he died in a motorcycle accident of some kind, and that might have started what we see as a potential downward spiral.
So let me turn to Jennifer for a second. I understand there's tremendous suspicion, and obviously, as a law enforcement officer, you have to, follow that to where it takes you. But what evidence is there, if any, that Ashlee is behind the disappearance? That she had an active role in this disappearance?
Well, her actions show that, right? Using a wig on her 9-year-old, renting this car, driving 3,000 miles round trip, which would take about 40 plus hours. And that's without stopping. And that's with the pedal to the metal. So almost an impossible trip. That is, in my opinion, at least could be argued as a child endangerment situation. You have that switching of the license plates. And this case so much mirrors, Sarah, another case of Catherine Hoggle. Very similar type case with mental issues of the mother. And when you look at that case, that's what they originally charged with her, child endangerment case. So those are some of the factors that show that she was indeed behind at least this disappearance.
Well, mental illness for sure, there's something not right, but that's not really a defense to, I mean, it's not, if she knows right from wrong, then that doesn't rise to the level of, claiming insanity or something like that as an affirmative defense. But Tyler Brewer says that he thinks that Melodee's alive and that is she's somewhere in Utah. Do you think this information, Jennifer, will help law enforcement in their search, or is it sort of unreliable?
Well, I will say this. Investigation 101, they should have already been looking at any connections there, any phone records that would have taken them to somebody there, any relatives, any friends, any associates. We heard other family members say that they do have relatives in Utah, but those individuals would have been talked to very early on, I believe, in this investigation by law enforcement. So I don't know how much we can put into the reliability of that information.
Because he's not really providing more. I mean, it's like a teaser, right? He's saying, I know she's there and I know who she's with, but he's not giving them anything more. Jesse, this arrest, I mean, I've heard you cover tons of crime headlines here on NewsNation and then also on Law and Crime, where there's been an unrelated arrest. So I just want to get your insight on this. This arrest for false imprisonment, is this just really some way for them to lock her up and press her for more information? She clearly has, or maybe even gives them an opportunity to further investigate. I've had this happen to my own clients where they want them for X. I've had a passport fraud. My client went in for passport fraud. He was a white supremacist. It was a federal case. But really, they wanted him for a murder that he had gone on unscathed on in Vegas. So then it was the civil rights. So it was like there's
Yeah.
something bigger going on than the nothing burger. Does that seem like what's going on here, or is this just really legit about false imprisonment?
It's a great question. I think they had to make an arrest because this was a dire situation, right? You're talking about a guy who's essentially being trapped with a box cutter if the allegations are true. But you're 100% right. There are times when someone, a suspect, can be charged with a lower level crime. Sometimes they're brought in, they're questioned. It can lead to further search warrants and you can get more information. There does seem to be a separation here, though. And even, by the way, when the judge who was overseeing this false imprisonment case wouldn't side with the prosecutors, they're like, hey, she's a flight risk. You know, she had wigs, the license plates. They go, that's a separate case. Okay. She hasn't been charged with respect to this. And by the way, I don't know necessarily if this is going to lead to more evidence about what happened to Melodee, because remember, at this point in time, they searched her house twice. They searched a storage locker. They also searched that car that she apparently made this trip with Melodee. I'm reluctant to say that this arrest for false imprisonment is now the floodgates are going to come open and we're going to get more information. But I agree with you. Sometimes something like this, and it is a serious charge if it's a felony, it can lead. But that's if you're dealing with a reasonable actor. Are you dealing with a reasonable actor with Ashlee Buzzard right now? That's the problem.
No, I don't think so. So Jennifer, Ashlee, obviously we were talking about this, that she's not cooperating with investigators. From a law enforcement perspective, is this always a red flag to you? Is it always, suspicious, or could we give her the benefit of the doubt and say she's not all there? There's a lot of distress. She lost her husband. Now she's lost her child. It's grief.
You know, Sarah, when it comes to missing children, this is a red flag. Parents typically want to find their children. They want to do everything possible to find their children. This is the kicker, though, here, right? She knows exactly where Melodee is. So she doesn't need any help finding her children. And she's not going to want to cooperate with finding her child, Melodee. Why? Because she's responsible for why she's missing. So it's a red flag that she won't cooperate. And I don't understand why they don't put her in dependency court. A judge could issue a summons for her and force her in court to say, where is Melodee? And if he's not sufficiently doesn't
Satisfied.
Satisfied is the word I'm looking for. Thank you. He can put her in contempt of court and put her in jail. I don't understand why that hasn't happened yet.
I mean, Jesse, when prosecutors say to me, well, your client wasn't talking. So what? There's no legal obligation or constitutional obligation to cooperate, right? That's what the Fifth Amendment is for, the right to remain silent. So, does it, how does that play out here? She's obviously not saying a word about what she knows. And I agree with Jennifer. She knows where her kid is. How does that play out here? She doesn't have to talk.
Unless she was obstructing the investigation or providing false statements to law enforcement, you're 100% right. There's a difference between her morally wrong to not provide information about where her daughter is, give a sense,
Right.
some sort of idea, which is concerning.
Yeah.
Keep that a secret. At least say she's safe and sound. She's safe and sound. But not to do that versus her actually being charged. You're right.
She's not saying anything.
She's not saying
She's
anything.
not saying
She doesn't
anything.
have to,
Yeah.
Which again, it raises questions about where's Melodee,
Yeah. And that's what's so concerning about this case. It's Jennifer, I want to come to you for the last one. This is obviously valuable time. Every day that passes could be a day too late to find Melodee. What are the chances that she could be located at this point, given the effort of law enforcement?
Well, of course, with this new information, they're going to be tracking down what she had to say. Again, I think it's very clear she wasn't in her right mind when she gave Tyler this information. Is it valid? Is it not valid? What I found interesting was in the last week of October, she tried to rent another car. Now, this was very interesting to me at the time. She wasn't able to rent that car, but what was her purpose? And I always said this wasn't to flee. She wasn't going to flee that house. This was to go where Melodee was. The question is, was Melodee deceased or is Melodee alive? And she was going to retrieve her. But I think for me, that's the single largest clue we have so far that I think she was going to return to where Melodee is. It gives us hope.
So she rented a car after the first car, like after the disappearance.
Tried to.
Oh,
She
tried to. Okay.
Right. They saw her on surveillance. They did not rent the car for her. You know, she has a lot of serious problems financially, Sarah. At about $23,000. I mean, she has a lot of debtors coming after her, which of course raises my flag. Who paid that $10,000 to post that bond? But nevertheless, that's a little sidebar, if you will, Jesse. But back to your question.
Wait, the bond. Wait, sorry. The bond was 10,000, or the 10% was 10,000. I'm asking because,
10%. It was $100,000 bond that was at least initially set, and unless that was lowered, that would have been the price typically $10,000 for a bondsman.
Okay, because if it's one count of false imprisonment, it's it's a $50,000 bond in Lompoc, which is where she was arrested, which is Santa Barbara. So $50,000 bond, 10% of it is 5,000. So maybe she's charged with two counts, one for like the locks and the other one for the box cutter. I don't know, but $100,000 is more than I calculated, because I was thinking, well, if it's 50,000, most people can come up with 5,000, to get the bond, right? But 10,000 obviously is double that amount. Anyway, I want to turn to Safia, because on this show, what sets us apart is that we take a look back to historical high-profile cases where there's been a similar issue. And here we're dealing with parents whose children go missing, and they have some role in the disappearance or even potentially murder. God forbid that's not what we're talking about here. So, Safia, what do you have for us today?
Yeah, I mean, we don't know exactly what happened to Melodee. This is all still, going on, but I thought it would be interesting to take a look at some cases where parents initially deny involvement or they kind of don't say anything, and then later evidence connects them to the disappearance. So I want to start off with Casey Anthony, because I think everybody here knows that case pretty well. So in 2008, Orlando mom, Casey Anthony, says her 2-year-old daughter, Kaylee, was kidnapped. Initially, she said she was kidnapped by a babysitter, and kind of maintained this narrative to say, I have no idea where she is. She's gone. We have to find her. Now, the investigation later found that there was no babysitter, and that she was actually partying the days leading up to Kaylee's disappearance. Now, weeks later, Kaylee's skeletal remains are found not too far from Casey Anthony's home, and she gets charged with first-degree murder. Prosecutors say she killed Kaylee because she wanted to be free of her parental responsibility. She wanted to be free as a bird. Defense attorneys say that the little girl died of an accidental drowning. She eventually was acquitted of the murder, convicted of lying to investigators. We just talked about this case a couple weeks ago, Sarah. This was an interesting case. The medical examiner said that it was homicide by undetermined means. So it wasn't quite clear what happened. And that, I'm thinking, could potentially go into play in this case as well.
Well, Jennifer,
We don't know.
I kind of know what Jennifer is going to say. Do you think Kaylee Anthony is innocent?
No.
She was found not guilty.
Right.
We respect the jury's verdict, but is she innocent?
Yeah, she's factually guilty, and she's legally not guilty.
Correct.
So I respect, the job that her attorney did. He did an amazing job turning the attention away from her. But no, I absolutely believe she's responsible for Kaylee's death.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
So you just mentioned the similarities. Again, I hope this is not the case.
Yeah.
But if we are dealing with a situation where, let's say, we never find Melodee, let's say we never find her. You and I, everybody on this call knows that it is possible prosecutors could still charge somebody with murder, right? It's possible.
Right.
Again, I'm hoping
without the body.
the reason that worked for Casey Anthony, even though there was a body there, is because when you have undetermined means, when you have a question about what happened to somebody, if you don't have the body, that is grounds for the defense. That is grounds for alternative explanations. And particularly if you're talking about a multi-state trip, if you're talking about all these different variables, where this is preliminary, this is very early to say, but this is something you have to be thinking about because there is so much unknown. And you're talking about a girl who was transported across state lines. Now you're talking about a lot of different variables that defense attorneys can work with.
Yeah, it's absolute fodder for the defense. So what else do we have, Safia?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to take you all back to 1994. We have Susan Smith. So a South Carolina mom who went on TV, was pleading, said that she was hijacked. She specifically had a very specific story. She was hijacked by an armed black man who took the car, and her two boys who were aged 3 and 14 months were in the back seat. I believe it was like for 10 days, she was pleading for their safe return. There was a search. People were looking everywhere. Now, as investigators continued to dig into this, they found a lot of inconsistencies with the whole hijacking story. Susan Smith eventually confessed to rolling her car down a hill and then going into a lake, drowning her two boys. Prosecutor said it's because she was involved with a man who didn't want to have children. She was convicted of 2 counts of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Interesting case. She was up for parole last year, was denied.
Got denied. Yeah.
Got denied and continues to serve out her sentence.
Well, first let's start with her in prison conduct. She has definitely not been a model inmate. I remember things like, I think, she was having like relationships with the guards, and there was a lot of stuff that's been going on while she's on the inside. But even before, I think this is the one similarity that I see, you guys, is that she was also not really mentally all there. There was a lot of stuff in her background. I can't recall exactly, but she came from a lot of abuse and things like that. So, but again, it wasn't enough to get her off on the charge. Jesse, what do you say about this in terms of a parent who's found guilty?
Well, I think any parent that does something to their children, they're not mentally there. Now, it doesn't mean from a legal point of view that they can claim insanity. It does become a question, how on earth can somebody do this? And at this point, while we still don't know what happened to Melodee Buzzard, if you're talking about similarities, how could you not just even explain where she is, provide information? There's allegations she's tearing down.
She took out the posters. Yeah, that's crazy.
And again, if the allegations are true that she provided information to Tyler Brewer and kind of backtracked and was nervous about the information she provided and threatened him in a way, this is behavior that is incredibly, incredibly distressing and concerning when there is now a nationwide manhunt to find a 9-year-old girl who's incredibly vulnerable. If we can just emphasize that again, 9 years old.
Yeah.
Younger the victim, the more vulnerable, the less opportunities they have to take care of themselves. It's a problem. It's a real big problem.
I mean, to me, it's bad enough that she's not providing information. Obviously, that bothers me. But to take down the posters, like, who does that?
The wigs, the license plates.
Yeah.
There's a theme here, not being detected. I don't know. I can't explain this kind of behavior. I can't explain Susan Smith, but we try to understand it and make sense of it, but it's really hard.
Yeah. So we have Chris Watts too, right, Safia?
We do. And just to note, the defense in the Susan Smith case was mental illness. Her defense attorneys did say that she was suicidal and all of that. Obviously the jury didn't agree. Okay, so we've got a dad this time. 2018, Chris Watts, dad out of Colorado, another emotional plea on television saying, my pregnant wife and 2 girls are missing. I don't know where they are. We need to find them. Search begins. Days later, investigators, they ask Chris Watts to take a polygraph test. He fails that test. In the course of that investigation, he ends up also, the first time he confesses that he just killed his wife, and says that she's the one who killed the 2 girls and that he killed her after those murders. As the investigation ensues, you find out that Chris Watts was having an affair with a coworker and that he had been planning the murders for several weeks because he felt that his family was going to be an obstacle to his new life. He then finally admitted to killing all three and then dumping their bodies near an oil work site where he used to work. He ended up pleading guilty to avoid the death penalty and is serving multiple life sentences with no chance of parole.
Did he ultimately confess to killing the children too, or he
Yes,
just stuck to
he
the? He did.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there. Okay.
Well,
That's
oh, wait a minute. Remember, he blamed her, Shanann,
He did.
right?
Yeah.
Then he gave one story, and then he waited and told federal agents another story. Who's confident on this call? Who's confident that he actually ever told the truth about what really happened to the wife and the daughters? I can't say I believe him.
yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the idea of you know, um, deflecting and denying knowing anything when you're the closest person, in this case a parent, I don't think that's new, right? I mean, we used to talk about Alec Murdoch a lot. Jesse and Jennifer and I were on segments, and remember, he was obviously, I have problems with that case, I still do, but but I remember that video of law enforcement approaching him, and they've zeroed in on him as the only suspect, and he was like, I don't know, I don't, I mean, he was denying. Everyone denies, obviously, initially. I don't think that alone is unusual, but in this case the guy confessed. So
Well, because look, who else would be responsible? There were no other enemies. There were no intruders.
who would be other, like, who are the other suspects,
Yeah.
essentially?
And
Yeah.
look, Melodee Buzzard, we're in the initial stages. She hasn't been charged. Excuse me, Ashlee Buzzard hasn't been charged in connection with Melodee. But when we're asking where her daughter is, who else would have those answers? Who else would know? Who else might be responsible? She was supposed to be taking care of her daughter. What happened one way or another? She's the one who knows.
So I'm just curious to ask you all, is that at what point do you think investigators have something and they're holding out and they're not doing obstruction, endangerment,
Maybe,
neglect? I mean, there's other things that I think can potentially come into play here that they haven't done yet. So is it?
I mean, Jennifer, like, it's very possible that law enforcement knows more than we publicly do, that more than has been disclosed, because until they find her safe and sound, it wouldn't be prudent to make those things known, right?
100%. They've made known what they need to try to seek the public's help. For instance, that New York license plate.
Yeah.
A lot of people coming out now. At least we have one witness at that Phillips 66 station in Grand Junction, Utah, that believes that they saw for sure Ashlee, and then another individual in a purple wig. Or with purple hair, I should say. And that could have been Melodee. The problem was that witness identified her sitting in a car and said she was approximately 20 to 30 years old. So did that witness exactly, was she able to verify the age correctly? But we might have another sighting there, which I think could be very realistic because of those wigs. Those wigs, it's funny that she's trying to do these things. In other words, she went off of the main highway onto this other small highway. She's using wigs. She's using a New York plate. How can you be a louder beacon in the middle of nowhere, which is where you're talking about here, desert area? Look over here. I mean, all the locals and people in that area are going, okay, New York, purple hair. This is making no sense here. And
I mean, yeah, purple hair in Lompoc is kind of a rare sighting. It's Lompoc is where there's a big federal, although I think now it's shut down, but there was a big federal prison there. It's just a very it's like a very middle America town in the Santa Barbara area. It's definitely not like Hollywood Boulevard where you would see purple hair. So you're right. I mean, it's almost like she's calling more attention to herself. Jennifer, I think you said that there was another case that you also wanted to look back at, other than the one you mentioned earlier.
Well, actually, that one I want to just give a few more clues about. This was a Maryland case, 2014. This mother was the last to see her children, and their two children. and both of them never seen again. And I mentioned earlier that yes, she was pulled in, but then there were all sorts of competency hearings and issues. Anyway, they ended up charging her 3 years later, because the children still, by the way, have never been found, with murder. But they had to drop those charges because of her competency. Now, fast forward to 2025, just this year, she's been indicted again, because guess what? All this time she's been being held against her will, if you will, hospitalized because of her mental issues. But in a group therapy session, she talks about how she strangled them and
Oh
threw
my
them
God.
in the trash. So now investigators were able to go with more. So these are the sorts of things. This is why I was so happy personally to see Ashlee behind bars, because I thought possibly she could get help. I think this is way beyond a Susan Smith type character. This is, according to her mom, schizophrenia, bipolar, these serious mental issues. And according to a fellow named Bill Garcia, he's a new private detective that has just been, well, not hired. He's going pro bono for the paternal family. He talked to her just a couple of days before her arrest. And he said she was absolutely wackadoodle. In other words, couldn't hold a conversation.
By the way, on this show, we can say batshit crazy, so feel free. We could say these things.
Oh, okay. I don't have to stick with the third grade version of wackadoodle. But all sorts of issues with her from his perspective as a seasoned former law enforcement officer and private investigator. Couldn't hold a conversation, absolutely paranoid, delusional, he described her, and said that she basically was, quote, incoherent. This tells us so much, because her reality, if she has that beautiful mind, Lord knows what reality is in terms of what she could have done with her baby.
So you think there's a chance that she might fess up to something at some point?
I think there's a chance in the right situation and an environment. But I think our chances are fading fast that Melodee will be found alive.
Yeah. Yeah. Was there another case, Jennifer?
No, that was
That
the
was
main case. There's
yeah.
another case. It's Kyron Horman, and he was another situation though where the stepmother was last to see him, and he disappeared. But sadly, in that case, still no charges, even though it seems so probable that the stepmother who picked him up and then he disappeared, no charges have ever been brought in that case. And I did want to bring that up only because I think it shows that these cases are so difficult to prosecute.
And just one thing to add there, when you're talking about potentially charging a family member, a caregiver, a parent with a crime with respect to their children, we asked before why maybe no charges. If you look at the home, you look at the car, you're going to find Melodee's DNA there. So it's not like a smoking gun. It's not
correct.
Like Ashley's a stranger and she has this. So that's a problem. And that might not be enough to say what actually happened here.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's always it's the same thing with like sex charges too,
Yep,
you know,
100%.
where it's where the people live together. I mean, there's DNA all over the place. It's not at all what drives the case. Anyway, this was a fascinating conversation. This is such an important case because we all want Melodee to be found safe and well, and that's obviously the primary concern here. So we're going to stay on top of this. I want to thank Jesse, Jennifer, and Safia for joining me today. And to our viewers, thank you so much for streaming and watching, and please follow us. We will be back next week. And until then, the defense rests.